Well, ladies and gentlemen, to say that I'm honored and excited to introduce today's guest is just an understatement. Tonight we'll be in conversation with Karla Boos, the artistic director of the Quantum Theater, and then our beloved Mezzo Soprano Vivica Genaux, because they are in for a special treat for all the opera goers, which is the staging, the production of Idaspe, that is going to open at the Quantum Theater on October the 7th. Karla, I would like to start with you. So first of all, you and I met how many years ago? A few years ago, you came to Mondo Italiano with a little request. You had already some interest, or I would say maybe a little obsession with this piece by Riccardo Broschi. Can you tell us a little bit, first, before we get into the interesting part, let's talk about the very important mission that you have created for all of us to enjoy 1990, which is the Quantum Theater. Can you tell us what is the Quantum Theater?
Sure. Thank you so much, Viviana. I founded the company in 1990 after living in Los Angeles, and theater was very international in Los Angeles. There were just more people from other parts of the world. And I started to develop my idols in the contemporary theater and they were from other places, many European, South American. And I just ended up in Pittsburgh and wanted to bring some of those experiences to Pittsburgh. And I saw that there was not too much going on that reflected an international community and the kind of experimentation that was going on internationally. So that's how it started in 1990. And we're quite well known for one thing particularly, although Idaspe does not reflect it actually. That is that we move around, we make our works in places usually that aren't theaters. They're environmental, and they bring people all over the region to places they might not know to experience contemporary theater. It's one aspect of our experimentation. But I am a lover of music as a language for theater. I would say that's again part of my experimentation over these many years. So opera has become a thing that we do. Usually they're not the same kind of projects you would see at Pittsburgh Opera. They're either smaller, more chamber-related operas. I would not call Idaspe small in any way.
By all means.
Here we are today.
And so when did you become fascinated with Idaspe?
I became fascinated after Chatham Baroque, and I made a pasticcio, an assembled opera, assembling pieces from the Baroque canon, set with Shakespeare's text from The Winter's Tale. And that was in 2015. And it was a delightful process that sent me, much less familiar than Chatham Baroque, of course, looking at and listening to great Baroque music. And Vivica had recorded Bajazet by Vivaldi. And I fell in love with everything in that opera. And for a while, we thought we were going to do that opera. And a great aria from Broschi's Idaspe was appropriated by Vivaldi for Bajazet. And so that's how we started down a rabbit hole that led to where we are today, opening Idaspe.
I'm sure it took a lot of work and a lot of teamwork, a lot of perseverance, because this was not an easy project, and we will come to it as we move into talking about the production. What we are in just a few days, where I'm doing the countdown on my calendar. Vivica, whenever you come to Pittsburgh, you bring an additional sunshine, okay, which Pittsburgh, right now there is, sunshine because we're talking to Vivica.
Thank you.
Vivica, you are from Alaska, and I had the pleasure to go to Alaska. And if I were to compare it to an Italian region, I would probably compare it to Sardinia in a way that is still part of a bigger picture, in this case, the United States and Sardinia of Italy, but has a unique character. The Alaskan people are very, I don't know, maybe it's a less, so to speak, contaminated. When I came, I was training for a marathon, and I landed, it was my first time. And by the time I got my suitcases, it was 10 p.m. It was solstice day. And I came out the airport in Anchorage and had to put my sunglasses on. And I thought that was kind of hilarious. You know, all of a sudden you have this daylight that embraces you. And even when you want to go to sleep, you still have, but that gave me the ability to, once I was done with my running mission, to explore as much as I could without feeling tired. 2 a.m. I'm still driving, still taking pictures. But obviously, you know, the counter part of it is when you don't have the sunshine. So and you have, you know, long periods of, you know, darkness, so to speak, a lot more maybe staying at home. How does being an Alaskan first affect who you are? And how did that affect your own rapport with the arts?
I think it was absolutely crucial and intrinsic to who I've become. I always say that when I was growing up, we were fortunate that we were in the Cold War, and so the airspace over Russia was closed, and so all artists coming from Europe going to the Orient had to, all the planes stopped at Anchorage to refuel. And so we had wonderful concert organizers in Anchorage and in Fairbanks, where I grew up, who would convince these artists to please stop in Anchorage and do a concert, and then take a 50-minute flight to Fairbanks and repeat the concert there. And it was kind of like a dress rehearsal for them for their big concerts in Tokyo or in Seoul or something like that. So as a community, we had these amazing international artists for a ticket price that, you know, if I had grown up in Chicago or New York, I probably wouldn't have been able to afford a ticket for these people. And the other aspect that you say, yeah, we have 9 months of winter. So I remember the summers for us, we just are outside all the time. And I was born and raised in Alaska. So for me, sleeping with the lights, with the sun, it's not a problem. But a lot of people who do move up there, they have to have blinds and everything like that. But I would go blueberry picking with my dogs at 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, you know, it was just, you feel the warmth that the peat moss is emanating from the day's sunshine. It's just beautiful. So the winter is very long and very dark. Alaskans tend to be very independent. They have moved up there for freedom, I think, you know, to be allowed to be who they want to be and live the way that they choose to live. The contrast of that lust for independence is an absolute need to come together in society. And so what had happened since my parents moved up in 1948 is that there are all these community arts organizations organized, and we have a really high level of artists also who are there, you know, for their mental reasons of how do you say, to be inspired by nature and everything like that. And then they also teach. And so I had everything growing up. I had ballet, I had tap, I had jazzercise, I had aerobics, I had water ballet, I had ceramics, I had horseback riding, I had, I mean, they taught hula dancing. I mean, you know, you name it. My sister learned how to build a steel drum also. I mean, so whatever you wanted to do, there's the opportunity of doing it. And it's an excuse to get together with people. And level of talent is really not taken into consideration. It's the level of passion, discipline, desire to participate that is important. And I think that has informed my journey through the arts through my entire life. I don't care what your level of talent is. Your level of talent doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be one of the top stars. It's what you do with what you have. Mm-hmm. And I think the Baroque music then became the perfect venue for that, because you're never trying to imitate somebody. You're always trying to go inside yourself and find who you are in that persona and bring that out.
We will, I think we'll come back to this point because I think it's also what distinguishes you from many different artists. And I want to have a couple more minutes about that. Mm-hmm. So your approach to music, did anyone else in your family was a musician or loved the music as much as transmitting, putting some seeds in you so that eventually you maybe even unconsciously reap the benefits of it?
My father played a very good record player and he had a great collection of Brahms and Mahler and Beethoven with, you know, Scholti, Bernstein, Bruno Walter, all of these, the best conductors of the time. And so that's what I grew up listening to when it was my bedtime. He was correcting papers. He was a professor of biochemistry, so he would be upstairs in their room correcting papers, and I would just have this fallout of symphonic music coming down on me in my bedroom. And I was telling the choreographer for our piece, also Antonia, the other day, is I see things when I hear music. I just see. So if he was listening to Prokofiev, I would be on the back of a huge black panther and just racing through this amazing landscape. I mean, music always brought me into visions and places that I couldn't see myself where I was. And my mother loved to listen to opera. We always had the Met broadcast was delayed to the next day, so it was on Sundays. And I never liked opera. I always tried to vacuum clean while the Met was on because I had my chores of cleaning the house. And so that was my thing. I hated listening to opera. And my sister, one of my sisters, always played, she was one of those people who could pick up any instrument. So she played guitar and banjo and you name it, she played it. I myself played violin for 9 years. I studied piano. I was, of course, exposed to music through choirs. I would sing. We did the Brahms and Dvorak and all of these masses with the choirs, and I played in orchestra. So I was constantly, and jazz also, vocal jazz was a big part of my high school development also. I think music was always
in the house. It was always around.
And it was in the community. It was everywhere. Music was, yeah.
Talking about you visualizing all these in your own head, so to speak, all these symphonic pieces. The way that I was exposed to music during actually my middle school. We had a fantastic music teacher who would bring the old-fashioned record player. She would walk, because she would walk from the house to school. And when she was introducing us to a new piece, you know, obviously she would make us pay attention to certain movements that were going to come and the sounds that would introduce those. But the activity that we always did was a huge piece of paper we had to draw. Even if we didn't have any drawing abilities, almost as if that piece was a path, and we started to put our elements so that when we would go to the actual performance, it was combining our own imagination and interpretation of the piece, plus everything that you were receiving from the actual performance. And I think that was probably the most amazing experience I ever had.
That's fantastic, because even as listening to it, then you are participating it though within the process mentally. That's it. Yeah.
It's so it was a two-way conversation, and then eventually negotiation of the final experience. So you indicated that you played instruments. At what point your vocal instrument became your main instrument?
I think it was primary from the time I was in 6th grade. I was 11, and the 6th grade classes, there were 3 classes of kids in 6th grade. They would all get together and they would do a musical based on some kind of historic. There were these musicals that were prepared for elementary school presentation with kind of a fondo, what do you say, a musical base, yeah, a musical base on a record or something like that, and you would sing along as a class. And there were some solos in that, and we listened to the musical, and then everybody had, if they wanted a part, they could audition for it. And I just got hooked on this song that was sung by an American native who was singing about how the approach of the train, the train tracks as they were being built, she saw her civilization kind of crumbling and falling away to this white man coming into their world. And there was something poignant about that piece. And I auditioned without telling my parents anything. And I got the part, and I did the whole rehearsals without telling my parents I was doing this. It was just like, I wanted to do it, so I did it. And when we went into the first performance for the classes, another teacher in the school called my mom, who was also in the school system, and said, you have to come, Vivica. And my mom was like, what's going on? What happened to Vivica? She's singing, you have to come. You know, it's like, right. And she's like, what? She's what? And from then on, it was very clear that I had a voice. Everybody in the community was like, oh, you should go into singing. And I was always no, it can't be that easy. I need to do something where I can actually make a living for myself. But eventually it became clear that that was the only thing that I wanted to do. And I was never good enough at violin or piano or any of those other things to actually perform that. Theater, I also loved being in theater, but I didn't like the realism of real theater. I always liked the magic of being in the musical world. There's always something, even if there's sex and violence and whatever, drugs, rock and roll, whatever, it's always mediated by the musical texture. And so I feel a safety in the operatic or musical world. I feel protected, where when I was doing theater, I felt very exposed and very, in danger. Myself, my own soul, my own existence. And so I like the theater experience through the music. I can do anything through the music.
So eventually your passion took you away from Alaska. Where did you end up studying? And then I think probably your studies also with Claudia Pinza were fundamental in your development. Tell us a little bit about, and where do you live now? Because, you know, Pittsburgh, Alaska, maybe Italy.
I have a wonderful Samsonite suitcase that takes very good care of me. That's my home. So I think everyone who grows up in Alaska gets to the point where when you're 17 and you graduate high school, you leave. You need to get out, because having another winter, no, that's it. Then a lot of them come back to roost in Alaska, just because then there's a saying, American by birth, Alaskan by choice. And I think that is something I feel very deeply inside of myself. I am always Alaskan. I am always Alaskan. And so some people find a way of living outside of Alaska in American culture. Some people need to come back to be in Alaska, in Alaskan culture. So I went to University of Rochester for science, for biology, and I lasted there a year and a half. Actually, I lasted there a year, and the last half was trying to get out. And I was permitted by my parents to transfer to Indiana University, to Bloomington, where I began studying with Virginia Zayani, and then moved to Nicola Rossi-Lemeni. So that was the beginning of my real conduit into Italian culture, Italian technique, Italian mentality. Also, I had never seen Italians before, you know. I had never seen, of course, Rossi-Lemeni, Maestro Rossi-Lemeni and Virginia Zayani. They just had brought Italy with them. Every time they came back from Italy to Bloomington, they brought Italy with them even more. And it was just, I didn't understand this culture at all. And so then that inspired me to study in Italy, and I met Claudia Pinza in her program, the Ezio Pinza Council for American Singers of Opera, which she held in Italy for a month every year, and I went repeatedly in the summers to study with her. But after I did that first month of study in '92 with her, she invited me to come back to Pittsburgh and continue studying with her, and it was a perfect opportunity. It was a great chance to continue that development of my language skills, my cultural skills, understanding. I now, after so many years, my husband is Italian also, and I feel more Italian than I do American. I feel primarily Alaskan, Italian, and then American are my three. And I've always tried to take the more profound route to learning, so that when I'm on stage, as much as possible is intrinsic to me as possible. That's always been a constant conscious choice. So I started wearing heels because I was doing Barbieri di Siviglia always in the first years that I was singing, and you were always in heels, and I was not comfortable in heels, so I just wore heels all the time, so that wearing heels for me is now like second nature. When I started doing the pants rolls, then I also switched. I switched to flat shoes, masculine shoes, so that I get that part of my posture just in my body, and now I can turn it on and off. Both of those male, female kind of aspects I feel like are very strong in me, and I can access.
And I think
I
this
think I learned that from Warren Jones. Warren Jones was here at Duquesne doing coachings. He was teaching accompaniment when I was at Duquesne University as a visiting artist, and he always traveled just with a backpack. He never brought his music, even when he was playing for Tom Hampson, when he was playing for anybody, he memorized it. And you think, gosh, that's a lot of work. But for him, it was less work to memorize the piece, and he was more in contact with the singer. He knew exactly where the singer was going while he was playing for them. And he traveled with a backpack instead of a suitcase full of music. So it was the more profound work that led to an easier performance and an easier life. And that's what I looked to as inspiration.
And then I think that is what makes a huge difference when you are, there are roles where people have expectations. You have to perform in this way because this has been done for the last 100 and some years. And but when I say the uniqueness and what you have, you take ownership of that role. You make decisions. You deal with those decisions, like even the heels, like little details like that. You make choices and you accept it, and then you bring to the stage a performance that, again, engages the audience, that lets the audience be part of you and you part of us. And I think this is, it's what it really makes us enjoy the productions even more, because we are all living it. We're living this moment, this special moment. We're not just spectators, and you have this unique gift of allowing us into a world. So it becomes just one big experience. And I think also and obviously I'm not in the field, but at times the new generation wants to emulate. And it takes them a long journey, a long time to come out that emulation and find their own style, finding their own contribution. And that's not an easy task.
There's
barriers.
a lot to unpack in what you say there. Yes. I mean, my husband is always talking about, he likes the visual arts very much. And he's always talking about how if you go to see a Picasso mostra exhibit, if it's kind of chronological, you see how Picasso did paesaggi. He did the landscapes also. He didn't start out with all of this, things cut apart and moved around. He started out, my husband always says, every artist has to start learning how to do a circle. Every artist has to learn how to do the landscapes or the fruit or something like that. You have to learn your craft. Then you develop your perspective on that craft, but you can't just start. And I think that for singers right now is we have to learn the traditions. I studied, she just passed away recently, and Enza Ferrari was my coach in Italy for years. And I learned the Italian traditions and the Italian pronunciation. The reason because what's written in the score is written in the score, but the traditions are because it facilitated the performance that way. It emphasized a part of the character that needs to be brought out in that particular moment. So the traditions are there for a reason, largely. Mm-hmm. And you need to learn that, and then you start pushing the barriers. Now, the problem is with the singers of today, a lot of them don't last very long. It's amazing, and it's very worrisome now after COVID also how things have changed even more. When I started in the 90s, we had rehearsals. And then you had some time off, and then you had a day off, and then you had the performance. now with concerts, often I get in, I always try not to travel and sing on the same day because it's always been challenging for me that, and it's too much stress on the body. But there are times in the summer, it was a really bad travel year. And in the summer, I had to arrive on the same day, rehearse that afternoon, concert the next day, and then I went back to Italy on the day after. I can do that. I can prep my mind. I can prep my instrument in order to do that. When you're a young singer, you're not habituated to that kind of rhythm. And so it can be very wearing on the voice. Your technique might not be up to scratch to match that kind of duty. But then also this thing about living in the world also, you don't have time to explore. It's been great with Quantum, with the Idaspe. It's been just fantastic because we even came at it from a very different angle than what I'm used to. Usually I call it the Arthur Murray School of Opera because the production of Barbiere di Sevilla at the Staatsoper in Berlin is a year older than I am. And you go in, you have 20 minutes of rehearsal. They teach you the blocking, the moves. You basically don't even need to learn it because on the stage, you can see where Federica von Stade put her left foot. That's what you're going to put, where Marilyn Horne put her left foot. You're going to put your left foot. You just have to follow that blocking, that choreography. They don't tell you why. You can't ask any questions because nobody knows anymore because it was done in 1968 and the movements are written, but not the motives, the reason. So what we're doing here in Pittsburgh is really coming at it from the theatrical point of view, looking at it from the text. What is this? What does each character? There was an interview with Renee Zellweger that I read like years ago that she goes through all of her scripts that way. What do I want from this line? What do I want from this person? What do I need from this person? What do I need to communicate to that person? And we really came at it from that point of view for the first time in a almost 30-year career for me. And it's fascinating because you develop different levels of communication. You understand who you're talking to also as a character. So it's been brilliant here. I'm really enjoying the process of it.
So, and this question is both for either Karla or both of you. Let's get a little bit into what the audience will experience. Now, this piece goes back a long time ago to the 1800s. But the characters are placed in a different time frame, in a different region, if we might disclose all of that. That's why I want to leave the description of what you can anticipate for us and a little bit of the plot for those that have never had the experience of or haven't read the biopsies on the synopsis on the Idaspe. Karla, would you like to maybe tell us what you can tell?
Absolutely. So Vivica's description of the process is directly coming from a wonderful lady at the helm of the project. It's Claire von Kampen. She's our director. She comes from a tradition of theater where she is a musical expert. She's a composer. So she is very expert in music, but her life has been making theater. She's worked for the National Theatre in London and Shakespeare's Globe and the Royal Shakespeare Company, really great theatrical organizations. So she wanted to make a great piece of theater whose language was this fabulous language of Baroque music. And she saw interesting things in the story that she brought further into our present world and thinks has a lot of resonance for our world. It's a story of immigrant children separated when they arrived in Naples. They come from the East, perhaps a war-torn part of the Middle East, arriving in Naples in the 60s, the 1960s. So it's the world has very much of a look of Fellini, a glamorous Italian world. There is the presence of a criminal element that you could relate to the mafia, where these immigrants find a foothold, and then the two siblings' lives diverge, and it's kind of about their story. One of them is more heroic than the other, and Vivica plays that hero, that heroic character called Dario. But that's the world. It's a glamorous world. It's going to have gorgeous costumes that reference the 60s and a sort of brilliant design that will support this story. And if our director were here, I think she would say, I've heard her say many times, that ultimately she believes it's about love. And each one of these characters loves someone who can't or won't love them back. And I, as I watch it, really connect to the journey of these characters. Each one, I want the best for them. Even the villain ultimately is transformed by love. So great subject for an opera, right? One that gives a hopeful message and in a beautiful, glamorous package.
So Vivica, you have been playing, I don't know, 40 roles, and you sometimes there are female roles, female roles, male roles, and you have this ability to transport from one, take us to one and the other. What are some of the challenges or maybe your strategies to that you put into performing also a male role?
I can kind of describe the process. I mean, when I first started, so first I had to kind of learn how to be female first, because in Alaska, of course, female is not useful. You have to be strong and useful, functional. So anything that I grew up recognizing as female for me was really quite negative and very weak and non-functional, non-useful. So when I went to Italy and when I went to Spain, then I really revised that, because the women have such a strength in their femininity, in the way that they present themselves, in the makeup, in the hair, in the whole presentation, the energy. And I had seen in the 80s also how here in the United States, especially, the women who were entering then the business market, they were supposed to butch up. They were supposed to have big shoulder pads, and they were supposed to be kind of more ferocious for the men, you know, and they were being taught to use weapons or tools that were not intrinsic to the feminine psyche, brain, body. And so I think they were really weakened by that. What I did when I was in Italy, starting in '92, and then every year successively, learning Italian culture, learning the Latino culture, basically, and also the French, the Romantic cultures, was what are the tools of women? Beyond that, then I had to learn what are the tools of men. And there was a really neat movement also. Robert Bly in the 90s was writing about Iron John and how male and female communication skills are different, how language is used differently, how men tend to be problem solvers. So if a woman comes to them with saying women tend to just discuss problems over and over and over, they're not necessarily looking for a solution. They're just looking at analyzing it from different points of view. Men think if you bring them a problem that you want them to solve it for you immediately. Women get frustrated because they don't want a solution. They just want to talk about it. All of those things kind of were things that were in my baggage in my past that came then to be useful in this analysis of men and women. And also the arts, if you look at the Caravaggio, if you look at the paintings and things from the beginning of the Baroque period through the Enlightenment, you see how it's not so much masculine, feminine, it's androgyny. And so one of the first pants roles that I did was the Donizetti piece, Alla Hora in Granada, which had not been performed since 1824 when it had been performed, and it was at the Maestranza in Seville. And so I came in on a horse. I was sent to horseback riding school to learn how to mount and dismount the horse like a man. I had a guy who was the assistant to the stage manager who was looked exactly like Yul Brynner. And he followed me around always, and he corrected my shoulders, and he corrected how I walked down the stairs, that hips don't move, shoulders stay. women are like this, they protect their breasts, they protect their solar plexus. Men are much more open, okay, hit me, I'm here, present. So all those things were things that I learned consciously, and that then I started consciously releasing also. So trying not to emphasize those. Male, female, we all have male and female. I think the difference for me in the male is your menu of responses available to you. Women in a certain time period and in a certain framework have, and especially what we associate with opera, because we see Lucia, we see Traviata, we see Bohème, we see Aida, where for women, the solution is to go crazy, to die of consumption, to eliminate themselves. The problem is solved when the woman is eliminated. In the Baroque music, the woman stands up and steps in. When I used to sing Gli Italiani Leggeri of Rossini, also people would say, oh, he was such a feminist. He was so, it's such a strong feminist character, Italiana. She comes from the Baroque tradition. Bradamante in Alcina. Bradamante gets dressed up in armor and goes looking for Ruggiero. She doesn't sit at home pining, and she doesn't die of consumption. She goes and she rescues her guy. The same thing in multiple extractions of that Baroque tradition, where the woman had an identity and the problem was solved also through the woman's participation and involvement. So it all depends on contextually where you are. Here we're in an Italian, Naples, Calabria, kind of the southern Italy, kind of where you have the mafia kind of ombra, the shadow of a mafia kind of organization anyway. If it's not a mafia, it's an organization that is there for the protection of that society, of that family. And that family is not necessarily a blood family. It's also of immigrants, people accepted into that family and under that umbrella. And so you have in this opera two camps. You have the Medes and the Persians, which in our context are two clans, basically. And so you have to look at which is another thing that Claire did. Where are you on the social structure of this clan? So myself, Dario, I have also Idaspe in my clan, and he's the title role. He's a warrior. He's a very spontaneous, very kinetic energy person. Dario is more reflective, more stand back, let's wait and see, and let's make a plan, and then let's execute that plan. So you have to see where you are in your structure, what menu of options that structure offers you as a character. More than female male in this context.
Do you associate yourself with Dario, that step back approach and reflect? Do you see some commonalities with the Vivica as a persona?
I have Idaspe in me also. I have that kind of spontaneous reach out and just kill energy. I've got that as well. I think what in Dario is a very intrinsic part of me is what I learned from Cenerentola, from Cinderella of Rossini, is that altruism is, even if you can't see the end of the tunnel, I have it's inborn, but it's also reinforced by these characters, belief that if you just stay true to your value system, things will work out. And so that is very much a part of Dario, but it's also very much part of Malcolm in La Donna del Lago, Artaserse in Semiramide. That stoicism, I think it really has to do with that stoicism.
Sounds like an Alaskan speaking. I think it's in Vivica.
Well, obviously you have seen the end of this tunnel because production is coming. So Karla, would you want to invite our audience and tell us a little bit about some of the nights or also some discount opportunities that, and you have also an amazing ball coming up. 2 seconds about the ball.
Yes, we do have a fundraiser for Quantum Theater called the Q Ball. It is tomorrow night, the 1st, at a place called Roost downtown, and I'm sure it's on our website. but we are so delighted to offer this, especially to the Italian community in Pittsburgh and any Italian affiliated people. And we have offered a discount code that you can use, that there will be an opportunity when you go to the website that you type in Idaspe Italian, that simply, and it does give you a good 20% discount any night that you want to come. And I think we should say, Viviana, that we have quite a lot of Italian people, Italian speaking people coming on the 11th. So that might be a fun night to choose. It is 5 performances only, so you must act in 9 days. You know, it will be over.
I have my date with you ladies on the 15th, so that's where I will be in the audience. So
that's a good night too.
I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. Well, Vivica and Karla, it's been a true pleasure to have you both, and I can't wait again to see it, just to be back together. I'm sure when this project, how many years ago now we go back, that there was this idea, and then Vivica was approached and maybe got the call, Vivica, you interested?
More than 3 years ago.
Okay, so it took a lot of perseverance, a lot of hard work, and so Pittsburgh will be treated to a master performance from everyone on stage. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.